is British photographer Sohail Karmani. He's an academic professor at the New York University in Abu Dhabi. And he's going to investigate some sort of the more difficult areas of the craft of photography, particularly when it relates to human suffering and the key question which faces photographers in those situations, and then consequently, people like me, picture editors, and then above me, editors. Where do you draw the line? At what point do you pick the camera up, put it down, engage with the suffering in front of you? In his own words, he says, "It is almost a cliche of our times that capturing the suffering of victims of war, famine, and natural disasters raises crucial ethical questions among photographers, agencies, editors, and festivals like this as well." So, in photography terms, he's done travel documentary and is the author of a book about his own journey back to his father's town in Pakistan. But tonight he's talking about the ethics of suffering. Please welcome Sohail Karmani.
Okay, good evening everyone, and thank you very much for taking the time and trouble to attend this session. What I'm hoping to do this evening is to try and engage all of you, everyone here, in a discussion about ethics and photography. Before we begin, I think a few clarifications are in order. I just want to stress that this isn't going to be a preachy session. It's not going to be a sermon in which I lay out before you the 10 commandments of ethical journalism. That's not what this is all about. It's not a session in which I'm going to give you some ethical guidelines about how to be a better human being, or indeed a more socially concerned photographer. Instead, what I'm hoping to do is to foster a conversation in which we'll have an opportunity to think through, rationalize, and articulate our moral position. Okay. I also want to stress that I'm not going to take a position here just for the purposes of this discussion. Just hope everybody's going to participate. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pose super awkward questions that I'd like to engage with. So let's get started. I want you all to imagine that you're a photojournalist and you have just been dispatched by your news editor to cover a conflict raging in a faraway land. Your task is to come back with some pictures that document the suffering, pain, and tragedy in the remote area that you'll be covering. Your task is also to raise public awareness. But ultimately, your task is to try and force governments and NGOs to send vital humanitarian aid to the region. So you take on the scene, and you see a middle-aged woman sitting on a pile of rubble. The rubble that she's sitting on is most likely the remnants of what was once her house. She's crying and wailing. Tears are rolling down her cheeks. She is in a state of utmost desperation. You are struck by the whites of her eyes that betray a very deep level of trauma. There is something very raw and primal about the way she's twisting and turning and tearing at her clothes. As you take in this highly emotional spectacle, suddenly a ray of sunlight lights her up. The effect is very dramatic. And just at the same time, you see a plume of dust that envelops her in this mysterious haze. And just behind her, you can make out some smoke billowing from a building. It's a fleeting moment, but you realize that what you have before your eyes has all the visual elements of a very powerful photograph. But suddenly you are struck by a moment of moral paralysis. Just before you are about to press the shutter on your camera, you wonder to yourself, what should I do? Should I take a picture of this incredibly distraught woman? Should I go over and console her? Do you need anything? Get you some water. And if you're a female photographer, you're wondering, can I go over and just give her some warmth, some human warmth, and pat her on the back? Or do you crouch down, frame your shot, and fire off about 20 frames in the belief that in so doing, her picture will be splashed on the front page of the New York Times? It will raise an outrage in the West, and this will persuade governments to send vital humanitarian aid to the region. So here's the question, the moral question. What is the right thing to do? Is it to console this woman or to take the photograph? Now, I want to stress that this is a moral question. Okay, it's not a lateral thinking problem. Would you say, I'll do this, then I'll do that? It's really a moral question. And I want to kick off this discussion now by asking you to raise your hands. Please, I want everybody to participate, please. Could you please raise your hands if you would take this photograph? Just give me a show of hands. Can everybody please participate? I can just make you out. Okay, great. Could you just, I'm going to come to you in a sec. Could you also raise your hands if you would not take this photograph and console this woman? So I've got a few people here. Lovely. We're going to have a discussion. Great. And can you raise your hand if you're undecided? You just don't know what you're going to do. Okay, lovely, great. Of the audience members who raised their hand and said, yes, I'd take this photograph, would somebody like to volunteer who might do that? And please, some of you did have your hands. So can I go to the gentleman there? I was going to say the gentleman with the mask on. That's everybody. Go for it. Please, go for it, yes. I can barely hear you, so we're going to get a mic to you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Benjamin. I'm Nigerian. And by virtue of my experience, some people are so hot that when you move close to them to actually console them, because something happened like 3 years ago.
Sorry, you would take the photo, yes? Did you say you
I will, yes, I will
okay,
take
so
the
can you give us the moral justification for that? Why is it the right thing to do?
Yes, I was going to paint an instance. It happened like 3 years ago, and there was this slum that caught fire, and in a matter of hours, the whole place was razed down. And upon getting there, we were taking shots, and people were so in pain. They were almost going to hurt me. Why you, we'll burn you and your camera. Get out of here. You understand? So I'll rather hide myself, take the pictures, send it to the right authorities, and get help for these people.
What's the end goal here? You said you'd hide and
Yes.
take this photograph. And can you explain why you'd hide? That's a very sort of unusual thing to do,
Okay.
isn't it?
I was trying to engage them before taking the photographs, but
Okay.
they were very hot. They didn't want to interact. They just want to be left alone in their pain.
Okay.
So in that case, I learned that sometimes I necessarily don't have to engage them, take my pictures,
Okay.
and
And what's the ultimate goal, if I may ask?
so then with the pictures, send it to the right places and talk about those that actually need help
Okay.
in this particular place.
So just a question to you, if I may. What you've effectively done is you have transformed, okay, if I may, this woman into an object, okay, an object for a goal that you have decided for yourself, okay, because you feel that she could be perhaps useful for a grander purpose. Is that the...
Actually, maybe not a selfish
Okay.
reason, but actually thinking about considering her. She needs help.
Okay.
But walking towards her might endanger me too.
Yeah, but how does a camera effectively help her? Thank you, Benjamin. I'm going to see if I can go. Thank you very much for that contribution. Could somebody else who had their hand up, please, yes, go for it.
Yes, hi, my name is Isa Al-Jasmi.
Yeah.
When I take the picture, I know that the person I will be taking a picture of might be distressed about me taking the picture. But I would always think about the bigger picture here. Why am I taking the picture? And if, of course, I will not be thinking about self-promotion. I'm thinking about solving this issue so that it doesn't happen to someone else. Maybe for me, this is worth more than, making this specific person feel comfortable by not taking his picture.
But what effectively does a camera do in terms of...
It sends a message.
It sends a message, but insofar as this distraught woman is concerned, what does your camera do in terms of helping that woman? It doesn't. You're thinking about the grander purpose.
Yeah.
Yep. What about consent? Let's say she says, "I don't want to be part of your plan for the grander purpose." Okay, you can go off and pick somebody else. How important is that for you?
Yeah, I actually haven't thought about this.
Because what you've done is you just assumed, okay, that this person can be turned into an object for your idea of a grander purpose,
yeah.
and you have not sought permission from her. How do you feel about that?
Yes, you're absolutely right. But then again, how would I approach this person while in distraught and ask if I can take a picture?
Okay, let me try the mother test on you. If it were your mother, would you be quite happy that some shot New York Times photojournalist comes in and snaps a picture of your mother at the most
no.
You wouldn't. Can you justify that? Why would you take somebody else's photo, somebody else's mother's photograph, but you would take a very different view about your own?
You're absolutely right.
Try and morally, so you wouldn't take the photo now?
No, I would ask for the consent first.
You wouldn't take this photo?
Now I'm
because
in the
you
third.
have, because your mother occupies a very special moral category that you do not extend to this other woman.
Now you transferred me to the third category. I wouldn't know what to do, actually.
Okay, let's go to just have one more. And I'm going to go to the nose. Just somebody else who had their hand up and who would take the photograph. I think Izzy had her hand up. Go for it, Izzy. You were undecided, yeah? But let's hear what you have to say. Go for it, yeah.
Yes, so I think overall I'm pretty undecided about what I would do given the circumstances. On one hand, as you're saying, you're commodifying someone else's pain because you're trying to draw attention to an issue in the hope that that person will be an exception and it will bring change to other people. But you might not be treating that person with respect if you're portraying them as a victim, and that's the one shot that they'll be presented in to a Western audience. So it's very difficult, and I think you have to judge it by circumstance. And as photographers, I think we have a duty to know when to not take the shot, and everyone's line of where they draw that is different.
Where do you draw the line, though, Izzy? Because you're saying, I mean, you're talking in sort of abstract terms. So where is that moment where you say, I'm going to take this picture? I mean, you've got a woman who's completely distraught. When does that kick in? Can I, just very quickly, you said you were undecided. Where are you tending more towards, taking or not taking?
Probably more towards taking the photo.
Okay.
Because you've been commissioned to do it, and it's your job as a photojournalist to document it.
So what you're effectively saying is you derive your moral authority from your boss, because he's told me to do this, and so I'm going to go and do it. Is that what you're saying? I mean, that's effectively what you're arguing, isn't it? And that's a very unusual moral position to take. Would you agree?
It is, yeah. When you put it in those terms, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's effectively, so they've been told to do this, so I'm going to do it. How does that? No, maybe I'm misreading you.
Now I feel uncomfortable.
Would somebody else like to offer some moral reasoning as to why they would take this picture? There are quite a few hands up. Please do go for it. Have we got any hands up? Any hands? All right, we've got a hand up over there. Please go for it. Can we get a mic to the person, please? Thank you. Try again.
So I would take the picture.
Could you wave to me? I can't see you. Yeah, go for it, yeah.
So I would take the picture, but I would then find the story out after having taken the picture. I feel like because in that moment that you described,
yeah,
you can't go and ask for consent and then reframe it afterwards. So I would take the picture, then go and console the women.
Okay, you're answering a different question. What you're answering is, this is what I would do, but I'm going to push you a bit more. What's the right thing to do? Because you're arguing that I just don't have the opportunity to seek consent. And what I'd say to you, too bad. Okay? You say, I don't have consent, and that gives me some moral legitimacy to take a photo, because I can't. Could I get you to formulate this as a moral principle? What is the moral principle around whether you would, if you take, because you said you'd take the picture, didn't you?
Yeah. So I guess the moral thing to do is when you do see somebody in pain or suffering is to console them.
Yeah.
So as a moral obligation, that would be the first duty, but in a selfish perspective, you've also got your own duty. And so I guess, yeah, you are in a dilemma, but I would sway towards taking the picture.
Okay. What about the whole issue of human dignity? Let's imagine a civilian situation where you see an old lady and she accidentally falls and knocks her head on the floor. I mean, you would approach that woman, wouldn't you, to try and perhaps help her out? Yes?
Yeah.
What's the moral distinction here? Why wouldn't you sort of go, because as a human being, you are a human being before you're a photographer, I imagine, yes?
So with the old lady, that's imminent danger, that's life-threatening. With the woman that you described sitting on top of a house of rubble, that's longevity. Right. She's going to be in pain before and after you take the picture.
All right, let me make it a bit simpler. She's crying on the streets. You don't quite know. And this is a civilian situation. How would you approach that? I mean, I'm trying to get you to formulate a moral distinction, because the moral principle is that when you see humans suffering, that you reach out your hand. If at least you're going to suggest that you are a moral person, you reach out your hand and say, "Can I help you?" Or, yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the moral distinction here?
I think for me, it's the time pressure, the sensitivity of the issue. So, like circling back to the old lady falling over, that's imminent danger. If I saw somebody about to get hit over by a car, I'm not going to stop to get the shot. But if
How
they're
do
already
you
on the
feel
floor-
about the idea that she's going to be splashed on the New York Times, okay, front
Yeah.
page, and she's going to relive that moment for possibly all her life,
Correct.
okay? And, you know, you need to take some moral responsibility for that. I know that's difficult, but how do you reconcile that morally in your mind?
That's difficult because you can never know the impact of a picture until it is published on the New York Times. And if it's
Do you think it's a fairly plausible assumption that a woman at a very low point in her life with a picture on the... Do you believe it's a fairly plausible assumption that she's going to see that picture and feel very traumatized?
yes and no, because you can look back on your own life experiences from when you were in very low depths and reframe your own thinking around that and use it as motivation to where you have progressed to. So potentially if that woman looking back at that picture 10 years on could see herself in a position that's completely reversed.
Okay, I'm going to bring it to a close because I'm just mindful of time. Can I go to the members of the audience who would not take this photo? Could you raise your hands again, please? Oh, please, somebody help raise. Okay, could you tell these heartless people, I'm being cheeky, could you tell us why you wouldn't take this photograph?
For me, the best thing is to have a connection with the person. Now, the person who is in distress, I may not know him or her, but when I go, I may not ease her pain, but for a moment, I can be little help for her if I console. For me, that connection is the best connection you can ever make. Photo moment may be lost at that particular time, but moment will come later on. Story can be done later on. But consoling a person is the best thing on the moral grounds.
Okay, so there's that fleeting moment where you've got a very powerful photograph, but you prefer, because it doesn't sit very comfortably with your moral conscience, so you believe that I need to give her, yeah? You're going to be a very poor photojournalist, aren't you? If you're going to go around and saying, I can't take this photograph, I can't take that photograph, yes? I may as well throw away my camera. What's the point of photojournalism if you can't, I mean, how do you deal with that?
No, I'm not a photojournalist.
Yeah, I know you're not a photojournalist, but you
Well,
could have a moral
as
view
a-
about it.
As a photographer and as a human being,
Yeah.
I believe to make connection with the people. And I can have much better frames and photographs, emotions and stories the moment you have connection with them. Connection means consent always come with that when the person is at ease. Okay, distress may be lost, but the person is there, background is there, sun is there, maybe that particular ray of light is not there. Dust will come again. That
Okay.
moment will definitely come, but when you console someone, it happens. When you don't console, okay, it's up to the people.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Would somebody else who would not take this picture, would you please go? Yeah, please, madam. Could we get a mic to the front row, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I believe you should always ask for consent, and especially if you want to put the photo in front of the New York Times. And if you are not able to take the photo in that moment, then maybe I'm assuming if you're sent by the New York Times, you're a pretty good photographer. And if that's the only shot you have, then maybe you should look for another career.
Okay, just talk me through the practicalities with bullets flying all over the place, okay? I was saying, excuse me, madam, do you mind if I get your consent on this? Would you like to sign this release form? I'm being a bit little...
Yeah,
How
no,
do you... I mean...
I think there's a difference if you can see who the person is. If you take a photo of a face
Yeah.
that will be recognized by everyone in the world, or if you have a person lying on the ground where it's a person, but it's not
Okay.
recognizable.
So you would pixelate the photograph? Is that what you're suggesting?
I would ask for consent.
Okay. That's
Yes.
just not practical, is it?
No,
Do you
life
accept,
is not
but,
practical.
But tough is what you're saying, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah. But what do you, I mean, are you, because I'm following the trajectory of your thinking, okay? And the way, it seems to lead to a place where you're saying that photojournalism needs to, it needs to disappear as a genre of photography, because I'm wondering what you expect to find in a war zone. You're not going to find families having picnics, are you?
No, absolutely
And
not.
you're not going to find. So what's the point of war journalism if you can't do it? Because, as you said, it's tough.
You want me to answer that?
Please, of course, yeah. It wasn't a rhetorical question. It was a real question.
Well, I spent a fair amount of time in conflict zones,
Great.
and I've been able to ask consent. I'm not a photographer, but I have photographers who do work for me. And I have amazing photos.
Could you say that again, please?
I have amazing photos that tell real stories.
So you would say, I don't want to take that shot because I hold consent as a higher principle and I'll get another striking photograph.
Well, it's a moral question.
Yeah,
right?
of course. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, and we are telling stories about people, and I know I would not like to have my mother being taken and put in front of the New York Times.
And you extend that same principle to
do.
everyone else.
I do. I really hope people would do that.
Okay, no, it's a great point. I'm going to test you a little further in a few minutes, though. I'm going to just add another layer of complexity to this moral conundrum. I want you now to imagine that you turned up on the scene 10 minutes earlier. Let's go back in time. And what you see happening before your eyes is a heavily built soldier with a rifle, and he is striking this woman with the butt of his rifle. And you see this scene unfolding in front of you. What do you think is the right thing to do? I'm just curious to hear from audience members who said that they would take the photo. Would they still take this photograph? Could you say, no, who was the gentleman? Yeah, please, would you still take that photograph? So the question is, would you intervene now? Because you're seeing a woman being physically assaulted. Do you still hold the same moral principle?
So no, I wouldn't at this point. Because I mentioned that when you're in imminent danger,
Yeah.
then you have the opportunity to help or step in.
So you make a moral distinction between distress and violence. Is that what that's what you're suggesting, yes?
Yeah, so that's physical suffering that's being acted out in front of me, right? So the soldier is beating that woman, whereas the earlier scenario, she's suffering the consequences of the distress. So yeah, I wouldn't take the photo at that point, and that's where I would draw the line. If I see the physical action happening in front of me, I then believe I have the capacity to stop anything further.
I make the same point that I made earlier, that what's the point of photojournalism if you can't take pictures of that sort? But let me put something to you. That's photographic evidence, isn't it? That could be used in an international crimes tribunal. Yes or no? Yes?
Yeah.
And so, don't you have a duty to take that photograph? I mean, it's a bit like the George Floyd killing that we all saw in that video footage. And that's really what kicked off the whole Black Lives movement, didn't it?
Yeah.
That's visual evidence. How do you deal with that? I mean, what I'm suggesting is that you have an absolute responsibility to document this, because you're seeing something which is a war crime.
I think a war crime would go above my head, and I would rather solve that issue that's happening there and then, as opposed to starting a international political debate.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to go to you. Izzy, did you not have your hand up? Please, go for it, yeah. Could we get a mic here, please? And just before the mic's coming, would anybody else like to add to this? I'm going to go to you afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. I would almost take the complete opposite approach to this than the gentleman just said. I would actually be more inclined to take this photo than the one previously. And as you said, this is because you can document a war crime. This can potentially make a difference. In contrast to documenting someone's emotion, which might not be able to make a difference. And also, as you were saying earlier, in terms of ethics and portraying someone's face and their recognizability, perhaps you could cover the identity of the woman being beaten whilst keeping the recognizability of the person doing the beating. And you're trying to tell the story of the person doing the beating, perhaps from an ethical perspective, you could, save
So
the dignity of the
You
victim.
would try and strike a middle ground.
Yeah.
Is that you would try to protect the dignity of this woman, but at the same time try and get the photograph. But what you've effectively done is you have, if you like, disempowered the emotional, visual impact of the photograph. Because what you don't you want to enrage people? Because it's because of the impact of that photo, the visual impact of the photograph, that it's that visual impact that's going to lead to outrage and possible humanitarian aid reaching these people. You want to get a striking photograph. If you're going to publish a photograph that nobody's going to see, what's the point of that?
I know what you're saying, and perhaps a more impactful photograph would have an emotion of someone's face crying and stuff.
Yeah.
But then if we're having this conversation about ethics, it would be more cool to try and get a photo where perhaps her face is in shadow or with a veil if she's wearing a veil, or just to somewhat try and hide the identity.
Okay, and it's as I said, it's that middle ground, it makes a lot of sense. Could I go to you at the back, because you had your hand up, did you not? Could we get a mic up there, please? And would somebody else like to? Okay, I'm going to come to you later, sir. Okay. Please, yes. Yeah.
Hello. I'm not a photographer, but as a normal human being, I would have taken the photo for sure. The thing is...
Both of them?
And I'm speaking about the lady who's been beaten up. My photo may help this lady or any other human being in this situation. People, they might hear the story, but my photo would make a difference for sure by seeing it. So I would totally disagree with
Okay, could you do we have two mics possibly, or is it just the one mic? One, two. Would you take the photo, this photo, or do you just maintain the same moral principle? Just coming to you, because you said that consent is important.
So here your question was if I would step in and try to stop it.
Well, maybe
someone is getting beaten up, and if you're in a position to stop that, of course I would try and stop it. That would be my moral duty as a person.
No,
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that you have a categorical duty to intervene in any way you can, maybe just waving your hands to help this woman. Can I ask you, I'm going to get you to, we've only got one mic, I think. Could I ask you to address that? Do you find that compelling as a moral principle? That we have a human duty to intervene in any way we can? Okay.
In the second case, I will take the photograph first, and then if I have some strength, definitely I'm going to intervene.
Okay.
Why? Because in the first case, the lady was in distress, so consoling her was my first duty as a photographer, as a human being. In the second case, because I saw one oppressor doing something wrong on the lady, so first thing is to document that.
So you would document this?
I will document first the photograph in the second case.
So you've shifted your position entirely.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to capture distress, but you would want to capture violence.
Yes, I shifted because of very specific reason. Now in the frame there are two things, lady and the person who is inflicting pain on her. Now, that's, as I said, if I am in a position to stop him, I will definitely, but first I will document that, and then within my capacity, I will do for that.
So you get a bullet through your head, what do you...
Yeah, definitely,
I mean,
if in capacity.
you think that is, you know, you're not going to last very long as a photojournalist if you take that line. I'm just, you know, you're going to get a bullet through your head, and she may just end up getting beaten up, and I'm speculating, but very, you know, it's very difficult to. Does anybody want to else add? Please, yes, Ray. Did you have a question? Okay, please. Is there somebody here? Please go for it. Yes. Could you just wait for the mic, please? Yeah.
Hi. I think to be a conflict photographer, you have to be a particular breed of person.
Could I get you to rate? I'm struggling a little.
To be a conflict photographer, I think you have to be a particular breed of person. I don't think it's to sit in an air-conditioned room and make that distinction. Few years ago, I had the joy of reading the book called The Bang Bang Club, photographs that were taken during the Ethiopian crisis. And people saw vultures attacking people, but chose to take a photograph purely because they were able to distance themselves. But down the road, they suffered post-trauma disorder because they just couldn't come to the moral acceptance that I could have saved somebody, but I didn't. I did my job. So I think it takes a different breed of person to become a conflict photographer.
It certainly is a different breed of person, but what's the moral principle that you're formulating? This is an ethics discussion. So what are you saying, that it's right to take the photo because?
I think if that's what I set out to do, and that's why I got to that particular place, I would really muster strength to take that picture.
It's a sort of self-serving answer, and it's a kind of, you work backwards and said, I want to do this, and then I need to find reasons to justify this. You know, you're kind of thinking backwards, aren't you?
I would not have put myself there in the first place if I was not mentally ready. I would have gone to that place knowing very well that I will compromise my morals to take that picture.
Okay,
it's a very existential question, I think. Why am I here? What am I going to do now?
Okay, thank you. Yes. I'm sorry, please, did somebody have their hand up here? Sorry. Okay, good.
Yeah, I had my hand up.
Okay,
Sorry.
go for it, yes.
Okay, I don't want to rain on your parade here, but I think you're asking the right question of the wrong people.
I'm asking
the right question, but you're asking the wrong people.
Okay.
The point being that if you're a shooter and you're there, then you've already made your decision, and it's not about abdicating responsibility or saying, oh, well, it's somebody else's fault. You've decided to go, and that's that. And yeah, there are times, and I've had shooters call me and say, I can't do this, I don't want to do it. Great, well done, thank you for making the decision and telling me, and then that's it, it's fine, it's done. No harm, whatever. But if you're there and you do it, then fine. If you have difficulties, then like the lady said, fine, step away, do something else. The question really isn't so much, frankly, would you take the picture? The real question, and perhaps one for the audience here, it's up to you, you're the boss, but...
Sorry, just missed
I said the real question, and I say it's your show, but I would be asking would be not so much would you take the picture, but would you publish it?
Okay.
And that's it. It sounds more straightforward and easier on the surface, but...
Can I address that? Because if you're a photographer, a great photographer, then the expectation is that you would want it to be published. Why would you want to keep it on your SD card? But let me ask you, let me pick you up, because what you said earlier is that you're asking the wrong people. Can I ask you to elaborate what you meant by that? Because I think what you're saying, and I might be I'm going to get you to
No, I mean, when I say the wrong people, I mean, obviously, I mean, there are shooters here as well, but
Yeah.
the question you're asking is almost an impossible one for people who haven't been there to actually say, and no one really knows. It's like you ask these, you're in a moral dilemma. You know, someone's getting raped in front of you. What do? Do you just say, okay, fine, this is going to make a great picture, or do you intervene? And the short answer is, and all of us who've been there, is I don't know. You really don't know.
But I'm going to, the idea that the general public, we consume those images are intended for us. We're a stakeholder, just as much as a news editor is, and a photographer. We have a stake. These photos are for our consumption. And we have our own moral compass, and we can come to a decision. Do I think this is morally defensible or morally indefensible? But you're kind of saying that just because I'm a war photographer, that gives me some special moral license to do what I want because I've been there and you guys haven't been there. And I
think you're ascribing morality to something.
Excuse me?
Yeah, I think you're ascribing morality to something. And I think if you want to talk about morality, ask about whether you would publish it. The things in existence you don't necessarily see, but someone else makes a decision, no. This is for wider dissemination, and that's a much harder question to answer.
I think you made a great point about would you publish it? But I would ask you the same question. Is it morally right to publish it, or is it morally right not to publish it? Where does that take us? Where does that take us?
Ask the audience.
Okay. Time's up. Thank you very much for an engaging conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sohail. That was really fascinating. It opens up all sorts of questions that are really hard to